Welcome, friends. It was late evening in the hospital. The hallways were quiet, except for the soft beeping of machines and the whisper of tired nurses. The young janitor, Ryan, walked slowly with his mop and bucket, his eyes heavy from another long shift. He looked over and saw a nurse sitting alone by the window. Her name was Emma, calm, graceful, but her eyes seemed lost in thought. Ryan hesitated for a moment, then gathered his courage and smiled gently. "Hey, you look tired. Long shift?" he asked softly. Emma looked up, a bit surprised. "Yeah, it's been a long day," she replied with a faint smile. There was silence for a moment. The evening light from the city outside glowed softly on their faces. Then Ryan took a deep breath. His heart was racing, his voice trembling. "Emma, there's a small dance at the community center this weekend," he said nervously. "I know I'm just a student, and probably not the kind of guy you'd go with, but would you be my date to the dance?" Emma stared at him, her eyes wide. No one had ever asked her something so genuine before. She wanted to laugh, but instead her eyes filled with tears. "You don't even know who I am," she whispered. Ryan smiled shyly. "I don't need to. I just know you're kind." She turned her head toward the window, trying to hide her tears. The truth was, she wasn't just a nurse. She was the daughter of the hospital's CEO, but she had chosen to work quietly, away from her father's name. No one had ever seen her as a person before, only as power or privilege. But Ryan did. After a long pause, she looked back at him. "Yes, I'll go with you," she said softly, smiling through her tears. Ryan's face lit up, pure joy and disbelief mixing together. For the first time in his life, he felt seen, not as a poor student, but as someone worthy. As the city lights shimmered behind them, two hearts, from completely different worlds, quietly began to dance in the silence of the night. Thank you for watching, friends. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Soul of Kindness for more emotional stories that touch your heart. The night of the dance finally arrived. The community hall was glowing with soft lights, gentle music and laughter filling the air. People twirled around in colorful dresses and crisp suits, but Ryan stood near the entrance, his hands nervously clutching a small bunch of flowers. His shirt was clean but old, his shoes slightly worn. He looked around, feeling out of place among the crowd of polished guests. He took a deep breath. Maybe she won't come. Maybe she changed her mind, he thought, staring at the floor. Just then, a soft voice came from behind him. "Are those for me?" Ryan turned around and froze. Emma stood there, wearing a simple white dress that shimmered softly under the lights. Her hair was open, her smile gentle but full of something deeper, something fragile. Everyone around them seemed to fade for a moment. You came," Ryan whispered, his voice shaking with emotion. Emma smiled faintly. "I said I would, didn't I?" He handed her the flowers, his hands trembling. "They're not much, but they're perfect," she interrupted, holding them close to her chest. "No one's ever brought me flowers before." For a moment, Ryan couldn't believe what he heard. How could someone so beautiful, so kind, and so graceful have never received flowers? He felt a lump form in his throat. They walked together to the dance floor. The music began to slow. Ryan hesitated. I don't really know how to dance," he said awkwardly. Emma smiled warmly and placed her hand in his. "Then let me lead." And so, under the golden lights, they began to move, slowly, gently, laughing at every wrong step, every stumble. People watched them, some whispering, others smiling. But Ryan didn't care. For that one song, he felt as if the whole world disappeared, as if the pain of poverty, the loneliness, and the sleepless nights all melted away. Then suddenly a man entered the hall, tall, serious, wearing an expensive suit. The crowd grew quiet. Emma froze mid-step. Ryan noticed the fear in her eyes. "Emma," the man's deep voice called out. "What are you doing here?" Ryan looked between them, confused. "Who is he?" he asked softly. Her voice trembled. "My father." "The CEO." Ryan's smile faded. The music stopped. His heart sank as realization hit him. She wasn't just the nurse he admired. She was someone far beyond his world. Emma turned to her father. "Please, Dad, he's my friend." Her father's cold gaze shifted toward Ryan. "A janitor. Your friend? You don't belong with people like him. The words cut deep. Ryan lowered his head, fighting back tears. Emma's own eyes filled as she whispered, "He's not just a janitor. He's the kindest person I've ever met." Her father grabbed her hand, but Emma pulled away. "No, you taught me to respect people, but tonight I finally learned what real respect looks like." The next morning the world looked different. The city woke up to sunshine and the soft hum of life. But in Emma's heart, a storm was still raging. After the dance, her father's words echoed in her mind again and again. "You don't belong with people like him." She sat alone in her room, holding the small flowers Ryan had given her. Their petals had wilted a little, but they still smelled of sincerity, of something real. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She had everything, a beautiful house, money, comfort, yet she felt empty. Ryan, on the other hand, had nothing, yet gave her something no one else ever had, genuine kindness. Meanwhile, Ryan was back at the hospital, mopping the same floor, pretending everything was fine. But inside he was breaking. Every corner of that hallway reminded him of her. Her smile, her laugh, the way she made him forget who he was for a moment. As he mopped near the window, he whispered to himself, maybe she deserves someone better, someone like her world. But fate had other plans. That afternoon, Emma walked into the hospital in plain clothes, her eyes searching desperately. The nurses looked at her in surprise. "Emma, are you okay?" One of them asked. She shook her head softly. "I need to find someone." She finally saw him at the end of the corridor, wiping the floor quietly, lost in his thoughts. Her heart ached at the sight. She walked toward him slowly, her heels echoing softly on the tiles. Ryan looked up, startled. "Emma, what are you doing here?" She smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. "I came to return something." He frowned slightly. "Return what?" Emma stepped closer and held out the wilted flowers. "You gave me these, and they taught me what real love feels like." Ryan looked down, unable to speak. She continued, her voice trembling, "Last night, I stood between my father's pride and your heart, and I realized I don't want to live in a world where love depends on status. I want to live in a world where it depends on kindness." Tears filled Ryan's eyes. "Emma, I'm just a poor student. I don't have anything to give you." She smiled through her tears. "You already gave me everything I needed. Sincerity, respect, and love. That's more than any riches in the world." For a moment, silence filled the corridor, the kind that carries peace, forgiveness, and hope. Then from behind them, Emma's father appeared. He had been standing there for some time, watching quietly. His expression was no longer angry, just heavy with regret. Emma turned in surprise. "Dad!" The older man looked at Ryan. "Son, I judged you without knowing your heart. But now I see you're the kind of man I once hoped my daughter would find." Ryan's eyes widened, his lips trembling. He didn't know what to say. The man reached into his coat pocket and took out a small envelope. "Here," he said, "this is for your college scholarship. Finish your studies. Make something of yourself. Not for me, for her." Weeks passed after that emotional day in the hospital. Ryan's life began to change, slowly but beautifully. With the scholarship Emma's father had given him, he started attending university again, studying late into the night while still working part-time at the hospital. Every day, he would walk past the same window where he first spoke to Emma and smile quietly, remembering how one kind moment changed his entire world. Emma, on the other hand, continued her shifts at the hospital, but something inside her had changed too. She was no longer the quiet, distant nurse she once was. She now smiled more, talked to patients kindly, and treated every person, rich or poor, with the same warmth she saw in Ryan. Sometimes late at night, they would meet on the hospital rooftop, under the stars, with coffee cups in their hands, just talking about life. One night, as the city lights shimmered far below them, Emma said softly, "Do you ever regret it, Ryan? Falling for someone so different from you?" Ryan smiled gently, looking up at the stars. "Different? Maybe, but I think we're only different on the outside. Inside, we both wanted the same thing, to be seen, to be loved for who we really are." Emma's eyes filled with tears. She whispered, "You have no idea how much you changed me. He turned toward her. "You changed me first." There was a pause, the kind that says more than words ever could. The wind blew softly, carrying with it the smell of rain and the sound of distant traffic. Then suddenly Emma's phone rang. She looked at it, her smile fading. It was her father. She answered softly, "Dad." On the other end, her father's voice was weak. "Emma, it's your mother." She collapsed. "We're at St. Mary's Hospital." Emma froze. "What?" "I'm coming!" Ryan grabbed his jacket. "I'm coming with you." They rushed through the night, the car slicing through rain and flashing lights. Emma's heart pounded as memories of her mother flooded back, her gentle smile, her kind words, her warmth. When they reached the hospital, she ran through the corridor, tears streaming down her face. Her father stood outside the ICU, eyes red, hands trembling. "She had a heart attack," he whispered. Emma's knees nearly gave out, but Ryan caught her just in time. She buried her face in his chest, sobbing uncontrollably. Hours passed. The doctor finally came out. "She's stable now," he said softly. "But she needs rest and care." Emma and her father sighed with relief. Tears rolled down both their faces, father and daughter, finally realizing how fragile life really is. Her father looked at Ryan. "Thank you for being here," he said quietly. Ryan shook his head. "You don't have to thank me, sir. Family stands together, and she's family to me." The old man smiled faintly. "You're a good man, Ryan. I'm proud my daughter has you in her life." Emma turned to Ryan, her eyes swollen from crying, but her heart full of love. "You stayed through everything." Welcome, friends. 2 years later, the hospital was glowing in the golden light of dawn. Everything looked peaceful. Nurses greeting each other, doctors hurrying through the halls, and the scent of morning coffee filling the air. Ryan, now wearing a white doctor's coat, stood by the window of the same corridor where he had once been a janitor. His badge read, "Dr. Ryan Walker, resident physician." He took a deep breath, smiling faintly. "How life changes," he thought. Every scar, every sleepless night, every tear, it had all been worth it. Behind him a soft voice said, "Dr. Walker, you're needed in room 207. He turned, and there she was, Emma in her nurse's uniform, holding a patient's chart and smiling with that same warmth that had once stolen his heart. For a moment he just looked at her. The girl who had seen beyond his poverty, who had fought for him, believed in him, and loved him even when the world didn't. He walked toward her and whispered with a grin, "Did I ever tell you that you look even more beautiful in scrubs than you did at the dance?" She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You say that every day, Doctor." They both laughed quietly, but their eyes spoke what their hearts still felt: gratitude, love, and a silent promise that nothing would ever tear them apart again. As they walked together through the hallway, the older nurses smiled knowingly. Everyone in the hospital knew their story: the janitor who became a doctor, and the nurse who turned out to be the CEO's daughter. Later that evening, Emma's father came to visit. He was older now, his hair a bit whiter, but his smile was gentle. He placed a hand on Ryan's shoulder. "I kept my promise, son. I helped you once, but you've earned everything on your own." Ryan bowed his head respectfully. "I couldn't have done it without her, sir." Emma's father looked at his daughter lovingly. "You remind me of your mother. She'd be so proud of you both." Emma smiled softly, her eyes glistening. "She told me once, love that's true always finds its way back." Her father nodded, and now I see it with my own eyes. The scene shifted to that same community center where the story had begun, decorated again with twinkling lights and music. But this time, it wasn't a dance for strangers. It was a wedding. Guests filled the room with laughter and joy. Flowers hung from every corner, and the soft glow of candles painted everything in gold. Emma stood at the end of the aisle, dressed in an elegant white gown, her eyes filled with tears as she saw Ryan waiting for her. Not the janitor she once met, but the man who had captured her soul. As she walked toward him, memories flashed. The hospital corridor, the first dance, her father's anger, her tears, his promise, the rooftop conversations, the nights they believed in each other when no one else did. When she finally reached him, Ryan took her hand, his voice trembling. I once asked you to be my date to a dance.